Pretty Jake here with TrendSpider. Happy Friday. Before I start on the weekend analysis, I just want to let you guys know we do have our chart month sale. So remember, the chart sale is essentially 1% discount lowered every day. So today, Friday, we have the 65% off. Tomorrow will be Saturday, 64% off. Sunday, 63% off till we get down to 50%. So if you are watching this video tonight on Friday, definitely take advantage of the 65% off before it drops 1% into tomorrow and then 1% into the next day. And let's get started on some charts. So we're not going to go over as many charts as we usually do just because we have the Sunday show with Brian Shannon at 6 p.m. Eastern on Sunday. So definitely check that out as well for more charts. I'm just going to go over SPY, QQQ, IWM, VIX, and Apple, DKNG, Facebook, CGC, and GRWG. So still quite a few charts, just not as many as we usually do. SPY, we talked about this anchored VWAP from this handoff point on starting on May 14th. You can see this anchored VWAP from May 14th really acted as a level of interest for buyers on last Friday, and pretty much the rest is history, just pretty much straight up. Now we are starting to get to some longer term resistance here. You can see this here on the weekly side of things. We are forming kind of this ascending triangle, so definitely something to keep in mind. However, we are still pretty far to the left in this ascending triangle. Sometimes you'll see ascending triangles kind of really coil up before they finally give way. So do we have something like that happen? There's still a lot of uncertainty right now in the markets. We'll just have to see what happens, but definitely something to keep in mind on the weekly side of things. We are getting close to these all-time high resistance areas. So that is SPY. QQQ, moving on. Daily versus weekly, we do have this breakout of this diagonal resistance here. If we turn on the raindrop, it is interesting to see that there actually is a decent amount of volume above this resistance line on Friday today. So there was conviction by buyers today on the raindrop. So that's 2 days in a row now that we've had a little bit of volume above this resistance line. Let's see what happens. But from a weekly perspective, I mean, talk about undercutting. We undercut this support line here, quickly reversed this week, and I mean, look at this. This is a lot of room to move up. Now, we're not going to go straight up, but even if we do something like this, I mean, that's a lot of room to move up in the coming months into years. So is this a new bull market? We'll have to see. Obviously, we've been in a bull market for a while, but are we kind of resetting here after a couple weeks of flushing and now setting up for another leg up? We'll have to see, but definitely encouraging to see that volume above resistance on the Qs. Now, going into IWM, this is one that actually did not perform like you'd think. Now, we did have a very strong weekly close. You can see here that we do have some resistance above. This was a previous level of resistance on the trend line side of things. Notice that we do have this zone outlined. It's not just wick to wick. We've created kind of a two trend line resistance zone above. Let's see if we can get through that next week. The one thing I want to point out here is we still have not filled that gap from the initial drop in February on IWM. So what's going to fill first? This one above or this one below in the 156? We'll just have to see what happens. And I think at this point, the market is pretty ready to just move up. But that's not to say that we can't have a pullback and all that at first. So let's see what happens. Going on to the VIX, though, the VIX was really interesting going into the middle of the week because we were ripping, but the VIX was finding higher highs, and that's essentially what this trend line is for, just to see that we were actually hitting higher lows on Thursday. Excuse me. So this was a valid observation until we just absolutely plummeted today on Friday, completely broke down. So it does look like VIX is starting to melt here. You can see here on the longer term side of things, we still do have this kind of rounded bottom forming, but the VIX isn't always respecting patterns in the market like it usually does on a regular stock, since this is definitely a little more complicated than that. However, it is always important to look at the VIX just on the chart and see what's going on. We still have this massive gap below, which I think will fill maybe quicker than some people think. And that's all around kind of the elections and what happens in the coming weeks. But all in all, it's looking like buyers are very much in control. VIX is getting destroyed here, and when I mean buyers are in control, I mean on SPY, QQQ, that type of thing. So VIX not looking great, and I just don't have a feeling this rounded bottom is going to hold. But anything's possible. It's the market. Let's move on to Apple here. Apple was a pretty cool case study on the balloon breakout. earlier this week, and this balloon breakout was pretty much across the board. So remember, a balloon breakout is any time that you essentially have a lot of that volume above a resistance zone. So in this case, we could see quite a bit of volume above this line. We had a strong continuation up, and even on Friday today, we had quite a bit of volume near the top of the range here. So I'm not trying to say bullish or bearish into next week. I'm just basing this on the raindrop charts. We do have a bit of volume at the top of the range on Friday, which would tell us that buyers are in control. Now, on the weekly side of things, this is using the Alpha Trends anchored VWAP approach, where essentially you're anchoring a VWAP from this horizontal breakout in June of 2020. And you can see how well this area has acted as support multiple times now. So 1, 2, and then this week is 3, and last week we even almost bounced off of it. So this has been a very strong level to hold. Anchored VWAP is really doing its job here, and we had a really strong move up going into the middle of November. Now, moving on into DKNG, this is one that we did look at in last weekend's video, and we were talking about this previous level of resistance acting as potential support, and that's exactly what it did this week. Nice bounce, almost a straight up bounce here. Now the thing about this, the fundamental side, or just the overall kind of the way the world is right now, COVID cases are increasing. Is that going to have an impact on sports betting? Will sports be canceled? Who knows? But that is something to keep in mind that isn't related to the chart that we need to think of. So all in all, we did have a move down from 63 all the way down to 35. So there's got to be some type of bounce, just shorts kind of exiting their positions. But it is important to note that we are kind of in that fundamental side of things looking a little sketchy with COVID. So we'll have to see what happens, but all in all, a nice bounce on support. Previous resistance acted as support into this week. Now, if we anchor the volume by price, what we were looking at before, we were talking about this volume shelf here, and this volume shelf held perfectly. We were also talking about this volume gap here. Price was able to drop very quickly through this volume gap, but it was able to move up very quickly through this volume gap as well. And that's exactly what it did this week. We found a level of interest for sellers, but remember, it doesn't necessarily have to be heavy selling. It just has to outpace the relative demand. And so remember, as the price gets back up to this area, people start to break even. Some people are like, well, I just had to deal with a huge drawdown. I'm getting out. That adds to the supply, and that's how we find a little bit of a hard stop here, at least for now. So DKNG looking interesting into next week. Just keep in mind the COVID cases. Facebook was another great example of using raindrop charts and being able to see really within that chart, within that daily candle. So if we go to the weekly side of things first, notice we're anchoring the volume by price from this March 16th low. You can see this volume shelf has really been forming now for quite a few weeks. Initially, this was a level of supply. Took a couple weeks for this to pan out, and now finally this has acted as a launch pad. So that's exactly how volume shelves usually play out. If price is below, they're initially going to act as supply as people who are break even are getting out. Once people are done breaking even and getting out and whatever they're doing, finally we get a little bit of a test here of a possible area of interest for buyers, and then we bounce from here. And remember, yes, we can have buyers here, but we can also just as much just have supply drying up, because at this point, as the price goes below this area, everybody's holding around 265, 266 on Facebook, and everybody's holding at a loss again. Supply dries up and you get a move up. So it's not always buyers stepping in here at the volume shelf. Sometimes it's simply just supply drying up, and that's how you can get a move in price as well. So on the raindrop chart, you can see here on Facebook, we did break out of this horizontal level of resistance here. Nice volume above the resistance zone and a nice move up. Now, notice here how we've had 2 candles with volume at the top of the range. That tells me that there's definitely conviction by buyers here absorbing supply at the top of the range that's being dumped on the market, and we'll have to see what happens into next week. But that is a very strong weekly candle to take a look at. So CGC, next one we're going to go over. Weed stocks had their day finally after a very long time of nothing. And just a huge move up, really. One thing I want to point out here is notice how much volume is at the top of the range here. Now, if we go to the regular candle, this is actually a big a wick. So you can see, even though we did kind of pull back here, that doesn't necessarily mean sellers came in. It could have just meant this big chunk of volume was a huge amount of market orders coming in. Once those market orders were done coming in and supply and demand went back to equilibrium, naturally the price is going to drop with relative supply back in play and relative demand. So just because price drops doesn't always mean sellers come in. Sometimes it just means that impulse demand, market orders coming in stop, and then the price naturally is going to drop based on supply and demand principles. So nice move up this week. Clearly a breakout on this longer term trend. Notice how we have this downward sloping trend here from May to October. We broke out of that, and now we're finally breaking out of this longer term area here. If we anchor the volume by price from this start of this resistance zone, you can see that there's quite a bit of volume here, kind of creating a launch pad for price. It's exactly what happened. We broke out of this downward sloping resistance zone, and let's see what happens going into the week ahead. Last one is GRWG. We've been talking about this one quite a bit the last few weeks. This is a classic case of undercutting support. So if you guys remember, we were kind of looking at this upward sloping trend line zone. We did break down, perfect undercut, just a great area to stop everybody out, and then a huge reversal, strong move up this week, and you can see it here on the weekly side of things as well. If we anchor the volume by price from this low here, you can see that this was clearly a launch pad for price, and you know, this looks pretty strong, especially with the overall story of legal marijuana legalization really starting to run rampant across the country, which is great. It, in my opinion, shouldn't be illegal anywhere. It's a source of tax revenue, and that's exactly what we need right now with all these other sources of tax kind of drying up from just people not buying as much at restaurants and all that, and that's just all part of the tax equation. So could this help get us back on track with the tax side of things? Definitely tax revenue is a good thing, at least for states, and let's see what happens. And clearly, in an uptrend, broke this previous high in August, and looking like clear sailing from here, but we'll have to see what happens. And you know, everybody has their own way of trading. Everybody has their own risk tolerance, so just keep that in mind. That is today's video. Hopefully everybody enjoyed it. Remember, we have the big finale, the shebang, on Sunday with Brian Shannon at 6 p.m. Eastern. Make sure to check it out. It's on YouTube at TrendSpider. You're watching our YouTube right now. If you haven't subscribed, just click the subscribe button. And if you like this video, make sure to give us a like. And we'll see you on Sunday. Remember that 65% off is only until midnight tonight on Friday. And as we move on day by day, that discount will go down by 1%. So make sure to lock in your discount. Let us know if you have any questions, and thanks for watching.